Miami vacation betrayal, I paid for it. But my wife's sister tried to erase me. I never imagined that paradise could feel like such a bleak and desolate hell. Picture this: Miami, sun-kissed beaches, luxury resorts, and me, feeling more alone than ever before. Thanks to my wife's sister, Ayla, 38. This was supposed to be an unforgettable family vacation with my wife, Ray, her aging parents, and Ayla, but it quickly spiraled into a complete and utter nightmare. Ray and I have built an amazing life together over the past 10 years. We've both worked incredibly hard to achieve senior positions at our respective firms, and our successes are definitely reflected in our lifestyle. We usually take at least 3 big vacations a year, plus several weekend getaways. Since we decided not to have children, we've been fortunate enough to travel extensively. For the past 2 years, we've also made it a point to take Ray's parents along on one of our annual trips. Her mother struggles to travel alone with her father, whose health has been steadily declining. This summer's trip to Miami was particularly significant because Ray's father had mentioned that he'd always dreamed of returning, since he and his wife had honeymooned there nearly 50 years ago. He spoke of it with such a deep longing that I knew it was something I had to make happen. Given how insanely expensive a week in Miami can be, I immediately declined his offer to help with the costs. I wanted to do this for them, as they've treated me like their own son for the past decade. I'm fortunate enough to be able to easily afford such a splurge, and seeing their faces light up at the prospect of revisiting Miami was absolutely priceless. However, the whole dynamic shifted when Ayla asked to join us. Ayla has always had a tougher time financially. Unlike Ray and me, her husband's salary barely covers the necessities for their 3 school-aged children. Every time we shared pictures from our trips, she would always wistfully comment about how she hadn't been able to afford a real vacation since her honeymoon. This year, she directly asked if she could come to Miami with us, and even though I knew I would be responsible for all of her expenses, I agreed. Family should support family, right? But Ayla's behavior was strange from the moment we arrived. Barely hours after checking into our beachfront resort, the first red flag went up. Ayla suggested we take a family picture with the breathtaking ocean as a backdrop. I grabbed my phone, ready to set the timer to include myself. But she stopped me, saying, "Oh, would you just snap the photo for us, Mom, Dad, Ray? And I are the only 4 people we need." It felt like a punch to the gut. I didn't say anything, figuring they might just want a picture of their original family. But this was far from an isolated incident. As the central theme of our trip began to unfold, she would consistently find ways to exclude me from every restaurant and tourist spot. It was always, "Oh, just the 4 of us," or "This one's just for family." I ended up becoming the official photographer, spending my entire vacation behind the lens instead of creating memories with my wife and in-laws. Even worse, Ayla started posting these pictures on social media, fabricating a narrative of this family vacation in which I didn't even exist. My in-laws would encourage me to join the pictures, and Ray would occasionally step in to remind everyone that I was also family. But Ayla always managed to manipulate the situation, so I was back behind the camera, facilitating her ideal family reunion. It felt like I was nothing more than a walking ATM and personal photographer. I was really looking forward to relaxing by the pool and soaking up the Miami sun. I was just about to step into the water when Ayla ambushed me again. "Will you be able to stay out a while? We want a picture of just the girls, Mom, Ray, and me." What started as a seemingly innocent request turned into an hour-long ordeal, where I stood by the pool while Ayla staged an endless series of photos. A picture of just the women, then a picture of the sisters, then another of the original family. Every time I tried to join in, she'd come up with a new combination that conveniently excluded me. If my presence was such a problem, I couldn't help but wonder why she had even bothered to come on this vacation in the first place. The boat ride incident the following day was even more egregious. When we arrived at the tourist attraction offering boat rides along the shore, we saw that the boats had 2 rows of 2 seats, perfect for families of 4. But we were a group of 5. Before anyone else could suggest a reasonable rotation, Ayla jumped in with her solution. She insisted that this arrangement was perfect for family photos, and arranged for Ray's parents to sit together in 1 row, while she took the seat next to Ray in the other. I found myself awkwardly crammed between strangers in the following boat. They even purchased a souvenir photo of their boat ride. Ayla's social media feed now features this picture of my entire holiday experience, perfectly captured in that souvenir photo from the boat, where I was awkwardly squeezed between strangers, while my wife and her family made wonderful memories without me. I couldn't help but notice that I was always the one being strategically left out. Even though I was paying for the entire vacation, Ayla never once offered to switch places or take a turn being the odd one out. The same held true for dinner at the fancy seafood restaurant. I had been looking forward to this reservation for weeks, specifically requesting a prime table with an unobstructed view of the sunset. at one of Miami's most upscale waterfront restaurants. When we arrived, the hostess led us to a round table for 6, perfectly positioned to capture the golden hour light reflecting across the ocean. But Ayla, being a last-minute addition to our trip, wedged herself into the seat beside Ray before anyone could even pull out a chair. Her parents, of course, took the best seats, leaving me with my back to the sunset I had carefully planned the dinner around. Forced into the worst possible position between Ray's parents and the crowded walkway, Ayla's true colors really came out when Ray attempted to defend me by suggesting we rearrange the seating. Ayla snapped at her, telling Ray not to be so clingy and reminding everyone that this was a family holiday. As the evening wore on, the dinner only became more excruciating. I tried to participate in the conversation, hoping to connect with everyone, but Ayla had other plans. She would deliberately steer the conversation away from me, focusing on topics like high school escapades, family inside jokes, and childhood memories whenever I tried to contribute. Even when Ray and her parents attempted to include me by providing background information or drawing connections between the stories and current events, Ayla would constantly interrupt and reroute the conversation. I felt like an outsider crashing my own dinner party, completely shut out by an impenetrable wall of shared history. By the time dessert rolled around, I had given up on trying to join in. But the final straw was our scheduled spa day. I had meticulously arranged for private suites in the resort's luxurious spa, one for Ayla alone, one for her parents, and one for Ray and me. I thought the 4 of us could at least enjoy a little pampering together. But Ayla had other ideas. She smiled sweetly and announced that they needed a girls' day at the spa, and that I should keep her father company instead. Once again, she was forcing me to cancel plans I had organized and paid for, using my father-in-law's illness as leverage to make me seem selfish if I objected. The manipulation was so blatant. Surprisingly, the day ended up being better than I had anticipated. My father-in-law and I had one of the most heartfelt conversations we'd ever had. While sitting on the beach, we connected on a deeper level than ever before. I wanted to vent my frustrations and tell him how his younger daughter was treating me throughout the trip, but I couldn't bring myself to burden him with family drama when I saw him so content, relishing the ocean breeze and sharing his memories. One night in our hotel room, I tried to have a private conversation with Ray about everything that had been happening. She admitted that she sensed I was upset, but her explanation only left me more confused. She explained how their father's frequent military deployments had impacted their childhood, suggesting that Ayla's behavior might be an unconscious attempt to relive those lost family moments. As their father's health declined, since they rarely had formal family holidays growing up, after hearing Ray's explanation, I began to question myself. Was I being too sensitive? I was paying for the vacation. So, was it wrong of me to expect to be included? I realized just how much Ayla's actions had eroded my confidence, since I was even doubting my right to feel heard. Update 1. The flood of supportive comments I received after posting about my experiences online confirmed what I had been feeling all along. People pointed out that Ayla's exclusionary behavior was far too consistent to be coincidental, suggesting a deliberate intent rather than simple oversight. Their perspectives helped me realize that this wasn't about merely having the right to be included. Because I was paying, it was about fundamental respect and acknowledgement as a family member. My wife tried to justify her sister's actions by citing their childhood experiences, but the truth was much simpler. What Ayla was doing was unacceptable. The persistent isolation and disrespect had reached a boiling point. During the last few days of our trip to Miami, my breaking point came the morning before we were scheduled to leave. While alone with Ray in our hotel room, I confronted her about her passive attitude throughout the trip. Her response continued to focus on maintaining harmony, claiming that she didn't want to cause drama and potentially ruin what might be one of their father's last family vacations, even though she admitted to noticing Ayla's actions. Although what she said made sense, it felt like family unity was once again being prioritized at the expense of my feelings. Something shifted inside me at that moment. I nodded in agreement with Ray's request to move on, but my mind was already plotting my next move. Ayla had gleefully enjoyed the luxurious accommodations and amenities I was providing, all while treating me like an unwelcome intruder throughout the entire vacation. It seemed she had conveniently forgotten that I was footing the bill for every meal and activity. Maybe it was time to show her exactly what it meant to pretend I wasn't part of the family. I started my plan into motion on our last morning in Miami, claiming that Ayla and I would follow behind in another taxi, while Ray and her parents left ahead of us. Ray immediately saw through my intentions. "I know what you're trying to do," she said. Her little nod was all the confirmation I needed. "Sure you do," I replied. "And now you can stay neutral, just like you have been for the entire trip." Ray seemed prepared to let karma run its course. Having watched her sister consistently exclude me from every family event for a week, After they left, I put my well-laid plan into action at the front desk. The hotel's billing system was perfect for my purposes. All extra charges incurred during the stay were paid at checkout, even though the room rates had been prepaid. This included every room service order, spa treatment, and extravagant cocktail Ayla had enjoyed. I requested that the manager divide the bills by suite. The request was so routine that the manager didn't even bat an eye. As I stood there watching him process the separate bills, I couldn't help but think about how Ayla had never once considered the financial or emotional consequences of her actions. I paid for my own accommodation and my in-laws suite, and then waited for the grand reveal. Ray's father's mobility issues and wheelchair arrangements required extra time, so she and her parents were already on their way to the airport. That left Ayla and me alone in the hotel lobby. Ayla's face drained of all color as she stared at the itemized bill in her hands. When the manager summoned her down to settle her account, the cost was astronomical, and as reality hit, you could almost see the shock waves ripple through her. "You're not covering mine," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. I remained calm, replying, "I've already paid for my family. You can cover for yourself." Ayla fumbled with her credit card and handed it to the manager, her hand shaking slightly. The declined transaction notification only confirmed my suspicions. She had been living far beyond her means all week, confident that I would foot the bill. Her credit limit wasn't even close to covering half of her debt. Even when the manager swiped her card a second time, it was no use. She was now facing the consequences of all those girls-only spa days and fancy dinners. Her designated ATM was nowhere to be found. What unfolded over the next half hour in the hotel lobby was pure theater. Ayla paced back and forth, desperately trying to come up with a solution to this sudden crisis. Every few minutes, she glanced at me frantically, obviously hoping that I would cave and offer to pay. But I remained seated on the comfortable couch in the lobby, appearing composed while relishing every moment of her predicament. I knew that if she had simply apologized for her actions during the trip, I could have ended her misery with a swipe of my card. But Ayla's pride prevented her from doing so. It was as if she still believed she was entitled to my money, even after a week of treating me like an unwanted interloper. She wanted me to offer, to beg. She finally made the phone call she had been putting off. As she described the situation, I could hear her husband's anger rising over the phone. He was demanding to know how she could spend so carelessly, given that the bill she had racked up was nearly equivalent to his entire monthly salary. After what seemed like an eternity of tense conversations and desperate promises on her part, the funds were finally transferred to pay the account. Ayla sat silently in the taxi on the way to the airport, likely still replaying her husband's reaction in her head, knowing that her troubles were far from over. But she was unaware of one final detail. When we arrived at the airport, which was getting dangerously close to our departure time, she discovered that I hadn't checked her in for her flight. She was left standing in the regular line, fumbling with her bags and growing increasingly agitated as the minutes ticked by, while I breezed through priority check-in. At the gate, I had discreetly arranged for business class upgrades for Ray, her parents, and myself a pleasant surprise to cap off their trip in comfort. Ayla, however, was stuck with her original economy ticket. The expression on her face as she walked past our spacious business class seat said everything. She didn't say a word, but her rigid posture and clenched jaw spoke volumes. Up front, we enjoyed first-class service while she spent the entire flight in economy. Ayla's composure finally shattered the moment we touched down. Tears streamed down her face as she launched into her version of events, practically running to her parents a baggage claim. Her dramatic retelling claimed that I had purposefully denied her the flight upgrade and humiliated her. Conveniently, she omitted the part about her week-long campaign to exclude me from every family activity. As she continued her performance, Ray's father, who was already exhausted from the trip, became visibly distressed. She was too busy portraying herself as a victim of my alleged mistreatment to care about his health. Throughout Ayla's theatrics, I remained calm and waited for the right moment to present my side of the story. When I finally spoke, I recounted how she had deliberately kept me out of every family activity during a trip that I had paid for. One by one, I detailed every family-only picture, every private conversation, and every calculated exclusion. The logic was simple. Why should she expect me to pay for her to be included in the memories, when she did everything in her power to keep me out of them? Her performance came to an abrupt halt when her mother intervened. After a week of her daughter's antics, Ray's mother had finally had enough. "Ayla, stop it," she said sternly. "We don't want to get involved, but we saw you cornering him the whole time. We even encouraged you to include him, but you had your own plans to sideline him. Now you have to deal with it." Ayla reacted even more fiercely, refusing to take responsibility for her actions. Instead, she accused me of controlling the family with money. In that moment, her true colors were revealed. You partnered with your husband to humiliate your own sister, your own blood, she screamed. Turning to face Ray, you'll see what this man is going to do to you. He's going to sleep with another woman right under your nose, and you won't be able to do anything about it. You're blinded by his money. Ray angrily defended herself against a baseless accusation, turning the baggage claim area into a full-blown family brawl. Without Ray's father, the situation might have escalated even further. He had remained respectfully silent throughout the entire ordeal. His direct remark, Ayla, your brother-in-law has done enough. If you can't appreciate it, better keep your mouth shut, finally silenced Ayla. But the damage to our family ties had already been done. A profound silence filled the airport terminal after my father-in-law's final words. With quiet dignity, he asked to leave immediately. I carefully helped him to the car. Ayla stood there alone as we drove away. Despite being 70 miles from home, she was too proud to ask for a ride. I knew the taxi fare would be exorbitant, as she had arrived with us and hadn't brought her own car to the airport. However, after a week of her deliberate ostracization, I had lost all desire to care. The drive to my in-laws' house was quiet. When we arrived, they both sincerely thanked us for the vacation. The long embrace from my father-in-law conveyed more than words ever could. That hug made everything worthwhile. After we got home, Ray and I fell back into our normal routines. For a while, we avoided discussing what had happened, until Ray finally broke the silence a few days later. The subject remained underexplored. She revealed that Ayla was facing serious financial consequences. Her husband was demanding full reimbursement, furious about having to bail her out. With Ayla unable to obtain a spot, he declined to save her and found it difficult to manage the repayment, alongside her regular credit card obligations. While Ray maintained her stance, she suddenly hinted that I might have gone too far. She also said that even she realized that her sister required this wake-up call. Ayla had treated people disrespectfully and exploited their kindness for years. And it was like now that she was being held accountable for her actions, and it seemed long overdue. I could honestly respond that I didn't regret my choices. By her actions, Ayla had selected her own lesson. And the most expensive lessons are frequently the most successful. After posting my tale online, I received a range of responses on Thanksgiving. Some believed I was overly strict and ought to have simply paid the cost to preserve harmony, to finance everyone's lavish vacation. They wanted me to be a doormat and silently accept being treated like an outsider. But I am aware of my value, and I will never let myself be used in that way. I only wanted Ella to be treated with basic respect and included in family events. I never intended for her to grovel or turn into my servant. In actuality, Ella and I were never very intimate, and even after everything, I would have paid for her expenses if she had just admitted her mistake and apologized. When she would visit Ray, our interactions were limited to courteous greetings of family events, and throughout the years we did not develop any significant conversations or a genuine connection. Nonetheless, because she was family, I readily agreed to pay for her trip when she requested to go on the vacation, and that kindness ought to have at least gained her some fundamental respect. However, it appeared that it would strengthen her resolve to keep me out of her life. Ella's husband was still furious that he had to spend all of his money to pay for her exorbitant expenses. It was almost the equivalent to his monthly wage. After a week of acting like a princess on someone else's dime, no working person would want to see their hard-earned money be used. However, rather than take ownership of her actions, Ella did what she does best and fabricated a story in which I was the bad guy, who humiliated her on purpose, while she was a victim. With my father-in-law's health declining, my mother-in-law had been planning an extra special celebration because we were aware that Thanksgiving may be one of the final holidays we get to spend with him. But Ella's husband's refusal to go through a wrench in the preparation, because he couldn't tolerate being seated at the same table as someone who would make fun of someone who wasn't as wealthy. After her daughter's antics from the trip, my mother-in-law sat him down and told him everything. She instructed him to check out the pictures from the vacation and really look at them. Photo after photo of me being deliberately left out, shoved behind the camera, or forced to sit apart may be found on Ella's social media page. It was impossible to ignore the visible evidence of my systemic exclusion. According to my mother-in-law, she and my father-in-law tried various times to include me, but Ella always came up with fresh tactics to prevent me from attending them. Since we had always had cordial and courteous interactions on Thanksgiving and other holidays, and I had always respected Ella's husband, this was especially upsetting. I had never belittled him because of his financial circumstances. I had never even thought about doing that. We were only two men who had joined the same family, doing everything we could to provide for our wives and help out where we could. After seeing my mother-in-law's remark, I was hesitant to go to Thanksgiving dinner, but I went out of respect for my father-in-law. After my father-in-law went to bed, the real story, which was far more shocking than I had predicted. The family had only given me a convenient explanation that Ayla and her husband were visiting her parents. As a consequence, a significant argument in Ayla's marriage had been sparked by the Miamian. Instead of growing as a person and becoming more humble from the event, she continued to disparage her husband based on his income. Even though she only works 20 hours a week as a part-time employee, she started pressuring him to take on a second job on top of his full-time job. I had always viewed Ayla's husband as a fair and good man, and he took the very reasonable request of getting a break from childcare and domestic chores in exchange for him looking for more work. She grew enraged by this concession. According to my mother-in-law, it was astounding how much was anticipated of him. Even though she had a schedule, Ayla wanted him to work well over 40 hours a week and still handle his fair share of household duties. The sense of entitlement we witnessed during our trip to Miami, it seemed, was only the tip of the iceberg. The woman was now criticizing her hardworking husband for not giving her a more opulent life, after spending a week accruing debt she was unable to pay. Although she once claimed to be happy with family holidays, she was now suddenly consumed with living an opulent life that she couldn't support. My mother-in-law had done everything she could to help her daughter see things clearly. She supported her son-in-law and offered Ayla guidance. My mother-in-law tried to convince Ayla that her demands were unrealistic. However, it appeared that Ayla had become dangerously aroused by the taste of luxury during our journey to Miami. When she would say she was happy to go on modest family holidays, she was suddenly consumed with a life she had not earned. Things had become so bad that my mother-in-law finally had to issue a firm warning. She bluntly advised Ayla that she shouldn't count on the family or her actions, and that they might result in a divorce. More significantly, she was cautioned not to discuss marital issues with her father because the stress of seeing his daughter's marriage fall apart due to her knew. We were thinking about how our well-intentioned invitation had gone awry on the way home from Thanksgiving dinner. Ray and I were discussing how there's no turning back once you get a taste of private island luxury. Once you have the experience of a private island, you never want to set foot on a public beach again. I recalled a remark I'd seen, and this applied to someone who had entered business. Her spouse was now being punished because we had unintentionally allowed Ayla to see a way of life she couldn't support. I felt awful about the whole situation, not because I made her pay her own expenses, but because I had exposed her to a way of life that had so completely skewed her viewpoint. She enjoyed luxury for a while, but now her husband was suffering. All I could do was hope she would change her mind before she ruined her marriage, in order to live a lifestyle that she could not afford. So, Reddit, after hearing everything, do you think I handled this situation correctly? Was I justified in making Ayla face the consequences of her actions? Or should I have just swallowed my pride and paid her bill to maintain family harmony? I'm genuinely curious to hear your thoughts and perspectives on this whole mess, especially since it's still causing ripples within my family, and I need some unbiased opinions. I understand there may be different viewpoints, but I'm hoping that you will be honest and transparent so that I can better understand if what I did was appropriate or not.